Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. I'd like to welcome you, dear viewers, to another in our series, In the Light of Islam. In this series, as you know, we look at various questions which have been sent in to me, either through the mail or through the email. Some have been faxed, or some have been called in over the telephone. I've made a note of some of them because of their particular significance to people in general. At any rate, you can get a hold of me with your questions, either by writing to the station's P.O. Box, Sharjah Television, P.O. Box 111, or you may email me at fld3@hotmail.com, or you may call at my office in Dubai at Discover Islam, 04-396-2190, or my office in Sharjah at Dar al-Fatah, that is 06-5339-864. And the fax number is 06-5323-724. And we'll be glad to hear from you any questions, any comments, or suggestions that you have to make. Anyway, the first question I'd like to deal with is a question coming from Ireland, in which a sister asks, Dear Dr. Bilal, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, is it a requirement for us to get married as women before we finish college, or can we wait to finish college before getting married? Okay, this question, of course, is one of priorities. Where do we put our priorities? Is education, that is like secondary education, more important than marriage for a woman or not? As a basic principle, yes, seeking knowledge is compulsory. The Prophet Muhammad had said, "Talabul ilmi fariida ala kulli Muslim." Seeking knowledge is compulsory for every Muslim. However, this is primarily knowledge of the religion. That is, the necessary knowledge which will get that woman through her day-to-day life doing what is pleasing to Allah. That is what is primarily she's responsible to gain knowledge of. Now, there are other areas of knowledge which we will put under the heading of, and that is fard, ayn, or an individual compulsory responsibility, obligation, individual obligation. Not doing it is sinful. Then there is community obligation, where if some women from the community gain this knowledge, then the responsibility falls from the rest of the community. We call that fard kifaya. For example, like medicine, for women to gain knowledge in certain fields of medicine which are special for women, or education, for the means of educating females in the Muslim community, etc. Whatever fields are critical for a society or community to function, specifically in the area of women's interaction, in women's functioning, these areas are a community responsibility for women to gain. If some women get it, the rest are, the responsibility falls from the rest. And of course, it is the males in that community who carry the primary responsibility to see that the females get this education. So, a person going to college, for the most part, would not be fulfilling that primary responsibility, the individual obligation, fard ayn, that is gaining religious knowledge. For the most part, assuming that this college is a Western college, this came from Ireland, there's no Islamic colleges there. So what knowledge she's gaining is possibly from that secondary category of community required knowledge. Then we go back to the issue of marriage. We find Prophet Muhammad had said, يا معشر الشباب من استطاع منكم الباءة فليتزوج. O young men and women, whoever among you is able to get married should get married. So there is a strong recommendation for marriage. In fact, some scholars consider it to be an obligation. Some have categorized it in different categories. Sometimes it's an obligation, depending on the circumstance. Sometimes it's prohibited. Sometimes it is recommended. Sometimes it's disliked. So, and if we just take that statement of the Prophet ﷺ, this is a clear statement urging young women to get married. So I would say that marriage, on the basis of that statement and others like it, would be a priority in this case. Because, for the most part, women in Western circumstances, and unfortunately in many Eastern circumstances, who will be going to college, they will be going into mixed circumstances, where there is what they call ikhtilat. Males and females will be sitting in the same classroom, males, they'll be coming in contact with males, etc. And of course, this as a basic situation is a haram situation. So for women to go into this situation, it should be out of a major necessity for the community, meaning that the harm that she's going to suffer in going into this college situation is less than the harm that the community is going to suffer without her getting that knowledge. This is how we weigh. Because when we look at a haram situation, for a woman to go into that haram, or a male to go into that haram situation, because I'm not saying that colleges where there is mixing is haram just for females. No, it is a haram circumstance both for females and for males. This is something agreed upon by all of the scholars. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about that. But the question is now, at what point does it become permissible out of necessity? So, I would say in her case, for example, and same thing with a male going into these circumstances, for them to be in a married situation is far better than to be in an unmarried situation going into these colleges where there is ikhtilat or mixing of the sexes. So, my advice would be to get married, with the condition, for example, in the marriage that's agreed upon with the young man who you plan to marry, that you're able to finish off your education, if in fact you are in the right channel of education. And again, I would have to advise people who are going into education, as Muslims, we have priorities. From the Western perspective, when a person goes to college, goes to university, they go there seeking knowledge perhaps for the sake of knowledge. They will go into liberal studies, liberal arts studies, they'll take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of the other, anything, whatever they feel like they do. It's like widening their horizons. This is the kind of perspective on education from a Western perspective. But from an Islamic perspective, we go into this thing, we should be going in with definite purposes. We need to know what we're going there for, focus on the courses that we need to take to achieve that particular goal, and get out. And that goal should be something not just personally beneficial, meaning that you'll get a lot of money when you get the skill, you go back in the site, you get a lot of money. No, it should be something which is really needed by the community, something which you will be bringing back some of the knowledge that you have gained, through the efforts of the community to put you there. You'll be bringing that back to the community. So the Muslim student in going into education is supposed to go in there with a community, you could say mentality. They're thinking in terms of what are these skills going to do for me and my community? How is it going to benefit the community? And they have to keep that focus. Because if they only focus on themselves, then they'll quite likely end up getting skills with which they will not benefit community. They may benefit themselves and benefit other communities. The second question, which is a question coming from Algeria. Dear Dr. Bilal, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In some of your lectures on the television, you have mentioned that the man has the final say or decision